Good afternoon. My name is Helen Miller with the Division of Environmental Financial Assistance, and I'm helping Dennis out today running the electronic part of the webinar. We have some folks still logging on, so we're going to wait another minute or two, and then we'll begin. So I'm going to mute the phone here for another minute, and we'll be right back. Hey, good afternoon. We're going to go ahead and start the webinar now. My name is Helen Miller, again with the Division of Environmental and Financial Assistance, and I'll be helping Dennis out here with the electronic portion of the webinar. A couple quick electronic logistics. There is no phone dial-in today. We'll be chatting in all the questions. We get a better sound quality with no connections, and we'll be recording this webinar, and we will be posting it, so if you miss anything, you can listen to it again. I will be sending out a follow-up email once the webinar has been posted, and then you can click on the link and listen to it again. That will probably go up on our website, I'm thinking Friday, because we have a couple people that are really busy right now that help us with that. So by the time we get that up there, it'll probably be Friday, but you will get an email. We encourage you to chat in your questions as you think of them during the presentation. Dennis will be kind of looking at the questions as they come in while he's presenting and answering those. If you have technical difficulty hearing, what you can do is close out your audio broadcast panel that popped up when you logged on. There's a floating panel at the top of your screen. To reconnect the sound, the icon looks like a little dot with parentheses around it. You can click on that to reconnect your sound, or at the top of your page you should see some tabs, and there's a Communicate tab at the top. If you hover over that, then it'll give you the option of reconnecting to audio broadcast. I encourage you to kind of give it a minute or two. If the sound fades in and out, please remember everything is feeding over the internet. So depending on your internet connection, there may be a slight delay. I think that's all I have on the general electronics logistics today. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Dennis to go ahead and start with the technical presentation.
All right, good afternoon, everybody. My name is Dennis Clement. I'm with the Office of Environmental Education here at the Ohio EPA. I've been with that office for roughly 16 years, and we do the grant fund plus a wide variety of other environmental education work with dealing with Project WET and just a wide variety of other educational resources that are available on our website that I'll show you here in a little bit. So we'll go ahead and get started. My contact information is here on the first screen. Please feel free to give me a call or give me an email. And use that number or that email, and we'll be happy to answer any questions as you go through the process up until the deadline for the applications on January the 15th. And that is next week, next Tuesday by 5 p.m. That is a hard cap on that. We typically turn off the system when it comes to roughly about 10 after 5 on January the 15th. So the deadline is very hard. And if you're in the system and you're previously working and it's about 5 after 5, basically what happens when I shut the system down, your application becomes void, and you'll get a message saying that you will not be considered for the grant round this round because you've missed the deadline. So we wait a few minutes until after the deadline of 5 p.m., just to make sure we're not catching anybody right at 5 o'clock. So if you have questions about that, feel free to let me know. Our website is where our guidelines are located for the Education Fund and this current grant round. Those guidelines change a little bit every fall, but the current ones are posted for 2019. If you go to the Environmental Education tab on our page at www.epaohio.gov/OEE, which basically stands for the Office of Environmental Education, go to the Environmental Education tab, and then under that tab, if you scroll down a little ways, you'll see the guidelines posted. And then beyond that, there are many other resources beyond the OEF guidelines for you to check into. Other grants that have been funded over the 20-some years that the fund's been around, and then just many other resources for you to tap into. Of course, you're working through the e-Business Center. And the e-Business Center, when you go into that, you have to sign in, and once you're signed into the system, you're going to come to the link for your particular application. You're going to be working with the two keys to the far right, which we'll show you here in a few minutes. That's the edit key. The edit key, and then there's a withdrawal key. So be very careful of that withdrawal key because it will withdraw your application. Of course, you will get a pop-up box before the system would withdraw your application, but you're just working currently right now with the edit key. This happens to be the application tab, the screen that's up right now. This is the application summary tab, and when I'm referring to the tabs, they are these tabs that you see here at the top of your application. Under the application summary, this is all of the parts of the application with the budget spreadsheet, the executive summary for general grants. Many grants do not have an executive summary. And as you see, and as you get closer to submitting your application, you're going to see this completed list all check off to yes. And when we say the completed list, basically each page or each tab is closed, and then once that page is closed, if you're not getting any errors in the system up here in the top left corner of your application, you will see a yes appear beside each item that's required. Once you have all these yeses on this application summary tab, then you will also have a submit button, submit application appear or in the lower right hand corner of the application on the application summary tab. Approved letters of intent, of course, become basically your cover page or your cover sheet, and that's the next tab in the system. So all the information that you put in when you had your letter of intent approved either a week ago or 2 weeks ago or ever how long, or it could have been this past Tuesday before 5 o'clock, all that information, once the letter of intent is approved, it basically takes that information and puts it into the application, becoming your cover sheet. All that information can be changed at any time. So if you're when you were doing your letter of intent and you had some doubt of maybe a project director changing or the amount of money requested, now is the time that you would be changing that on the cover sheet tab. Also on the cover sheet tab are the proposed start dates. They should be no earlier than June 1st, 2019. I recommend to people to maybe set that date, maybe June 2nd, 3rd, 4th, just so you're beyond that June 1st date, because sometimes the system, if you actually put the date that you can start, doesn't take that, and you would get an error message here in the upper portion of your application. Also on the cover sheet, you have a requested amount. This is the amount that you requested when you submitted the letter of intent, and then you eventually get to a tab that's called the budget tab or the budget spreadsheet. Those two numbers have to equal, okay? So make sure that those two numbers rounded to the nearest dollar equal before you are able to close out each tab and then submit your application. And you will notice also, oops, I'm going to go back, and there it goes. You will notice that there is a slight error in the system. You're going to see this one has $38,205.0. That's not a problem on your end, that's on our end. So just as long as this number on the cover sheet matches the number for OEF grant award or request, those two numbers need to match, okay? And then again, rounded to the nearest dollar. only include collaborators and maybe supporters that you have letters from. So those letters would be letters from collaborators, and basically the definition that we use in the Education Fund for collaboration is someone that is actually physically doing something to make the project go forward. So you might have a conservation district that's doing 4 presentations in a classroom for this particular project. So they are physically doing something to help along and educate the audience that you're trying to reach. So that would be a collaborator. A support person would be someone that is merely supporting the idea of this project to happen. So it might be your supervisor, it could be a president of your organization, or something along those lines. They just merely are supporting the idea, they think it's a great idea, and then offering the support to you to do this project. Collaboration means means much more than a support letter would come from. So if you're looking to do an application where you have teachers involved, certainly teachers would be a supporter because they're providing you students in order to come into their classroom. But if you're having someone that's helping you, again, with the project, those would be your collaborators, and you would want to make sure they use those terms. Either they're supporting the project or they're collaborating. And if they're collaborating, just make sure that they provide you with what they're collaborating on. Make sure these letters also are on letterhead and they're signed as well. I'll just step back one time. If you under the anticipated list of collaborators, if you have someone listed there and you did not at the last minute receive a letter from them, either a support or collaboration letter, make sure that you do remove them from that anticipated list of collaborators and supporters. We've had reviewers in the past that's questioned that. If you've left them there and then didn't get a letter from them, and they have marked off on points on the review process. We want to talk about objectives and activities. So objectives and activities must address for our application an environmental education. So there's some type of environmental education that you're trying to teach to the group of people that you're trying to reach, the audience. We encourage you to not create new curriculum. There's plenty of curriculum already out there, and an example here that we provide you is certainly Project WET. That's something that is funded out of the Ohio EPA. So if you are doing a water quality monitoring project, we really encourage you to use either Project WET or the secondary module of Project WET is Healthy Water, Healthy People. Now let's say if you have something that's very unique in where you are from, maybe it's only one of in Claremont County or Ashtabula County or something along those lines. You can create curriculum around that uniqueness of that. But we want to caution you on using the funds to create curriculum when there's just a great wide variety of that curriculum already out there. Of course, objectives explain what the project will achieve. Many times we get applications into the Education Fund and they have activities already written into their objectives. So we want to make sure we have an objective. I think at the system you're going to have an objective title, and then you're going to have objectives that you list that you're trying to do, what you're trying to achieve with the overall project. And then off of that objective, you may have 2 or 3 activities that you're going to do in order to meet that objective. So those activities are there in order to hopefully solve the objective that you're trying to teach about. Also under objectives and activities, we move to the, there we go, let's get the cursor up, to the objectives and activities tab. If you are wanting to add an objective, those objectives are those places where you add, it says add project objective. So you click on that, and when you click on that, it's going to pull up a box view. And in that box, you're going to come up with an objective title, project objective title, and then you're going to list the objective in here in the box. Remember that you are limited to characters remaining in the system. So be very cautious as I believe this one, for each objective you're allowed to have 3,000 characters, not words. And once you reach that limit, then if you go to close, let's say you're over the limit, you will get a error message. If you're cutting and pasting from a Word document, this counter will not keep up with you, but of course if you're typing into the box, it will keep an accurate count of the characters that you have remaining. And of course when you're done, you go down here in the bottom right corner and you click on Save, and then that saves the objective and you're moving on to the next part under Objectives and Activities. Under Objectives and Activities, if you then need to add, well, you will need to add activities, you go to the top left corner of that section under the Objectives and Activities tabs, and it says click here to add activities. So you click in the blue hyperlink, and once you've done that, it's going to add an activity down here at the bottom. You go and click on Add Activity. Again, you get another pop-up box. You come up with an activity title. This is where you're going to put your start date in and then your end date or timeline, and that's specific to that activity. And then a percentage of OEEF budget. Okay, this is not the in-kind budget. This is just what you're requesting to do this activity from OEEF. You can see this one here is 15%, and then you do an activity description. And then you go down to the bottom and you hit Save, and that saves that activity. And then beyond that, you're going to need to do outcome measurements for each activity, each activity. So then you go down to the bottom here, at the bottom screen, it says add an outcome measurement. And then you do a title for that outcome measurement, listed here, and then you have an initial outcome, and then you have a long-term effect for that activity. And then hit Save, and that's basically then completed. You have your objective, you have an activity, and now you have your initial outcome and your long-term effects. If by any chance you would like to edit any of these three areas, you're welcome to do so by coming over here and clicking on the Edit key, or you can click on Remove if you would like to remove. Again, you most likely will get a box that says that, are you sure you want to remove this if you're clicking on Remove, just as a safeguard, so you're not, if you happen to click on that by mistake, you're not losing your work. Budget. Budget is a big issue, so be very, very cautious of that. You must include at least a 10% match with your budget. So that's going to be on the in-kind side of the budget spreadsheet. You're going to have an OEF side and then an in-kind side. The more in-kind that you can provide, that would be like through salaries or maybe transportation or maybe recently purchased equipment. You can fix a dollar amount to that. The more you can have that in-kind match, the better off you'll be. And in some instances, we will award you some extra bonus points to your application if that meets and exceeds 50% of an in-kind budget. Cash matches are good as well. So a couple things that we've had problems with in the past, we do not fund any indirect costs. So electric, rent, just having a phone on your desk, those are all ineligible, and they're also ineligible as match as well, okay? And then also a big one that we always get is food. We don't fund any lunches or any dinners, any snacks of any kind. I will give you one thing that we would do if you're working with something called the Enviroscape model. Many of you might be aware of that. It does require food coloring and things like that, and we understand that some projects require things for teachers to do projects and such. We would definitely consider that as not an edible type thing, and it's needed in order to do the project. But you just need to make sure you justify the purchase of those items in your particular application. Under personnel costs as well, be very cautious that the cap for salary, benefits, and contractual combined are all under 35%, 35% or less, and that is a hard cap when it comes to salary, contractual, and benefits. You cannot exceed that, and that's both for the mini grant and for the general grant. Here we're just showing you a good mix of, they get 3% of salary or benefits, 16% salary and wages, and then there was a contractual part of this particular project for 16%, totaling 35%. This would be one that would over and exceed that, or be exceeding that. 28% salary, 7% benefits, and 24% contractual. It's those three totals combined, and if they exceed 35%, that application will be failed at the staff level. Other ineligible expenses, also, as we just mentioned, personnel costs and food. T-shirts. T-shirts are something that we just don't find a lot of educational value in. Now, if you are doing, say, a roadside litter cleanup and you want to identify the people for safety reasons, we would certainly consider buying 10 to 20, bright fuchsia pink T-shirts or bright orange T-shirts to identify you and for safety reasons only, not necessarily for an advertisement. Promotional giveaways, so pens, pencils, notepads, magnets, those things we don't fund. Again, we don't find a lot of educational value in those. And we encourage you to go to maybe to a local sponsor in your community, and maybe by including their phone number and their business on it, they definitely might throw some money your way as an in-kind match for those promotional giveaways. Construction, so moving earth or moving large pieces of earth, big pieces of equipment, again, we don't fund that. Heavy equipment rental or purchases as well. So to rent a bulldozer, to rent a tractor, or to purchase those items, we don't do that. Pass-through funds are funds that you would basically be taking our money that we award you in a grant and making small grants and giving those out to your local community. So that's considered a pass-through, and we do not allow those to happen. And then, of course, any other indirect costs or indirect costs being rent, telephone, lighting, and so forth in your office. Be very, very cautious that if it exceeds this 50% in eligibility, that proposal will not be considered for funding. Under the contacts tab, each application must include 3 contacts. So you have a project director, and that project director is the person that is making the project move forward. They're a very, very important person. And then you, of course, have a fiscal agent and then an authorizing agent. Of course, the fiscal agent deals with the funding, so they're receiving the contract, they're taking in either electronic fund transfer or a physical check and making sure they keep a budget for you. And then the authorizing agent could, again, be someone that might be a supervisor, a building principal, a superintendent of a school district, a president of an organization. Those are what we refer to as an authorizing agent. They're basically just allowing you to do it because they kind of control the group, or your supervisor or your immediate boss. So, again, all those letters need to be on letterhead, and one person can represent 2 of those titles. So the project director typically stands alone, then you might have someone else be the fiscal agent and the authorizing agent. Or, an authorizing agent and a project director could be the same person. Because we know some groups are very, very small, they don't have a lot of people to work with, so that's why we have allowed for that to happen. Under the uploaded documents, an applicant may upload a maximum of 2 files. So in one of those files are going to be all of your letters of support and collaborations, and they can all be combined in one, making sure that those letters are signed and they're on letterhead. And then the second file could be items that are related to the project. So maybe a workshop flyer, a brochure, maps, educational standards that you've uploaded from the Department of Education or something along those lines. But make sure that it's directly related to the project, okay? Letters, please do not send us form letters, so letters that basically say the same thing and you've just told your person to write exactly this, or send them the letter and you've just written and copied and had a form letter. That's not what we want to receive. We want to receive especially collaboration letters that are unique and that specifically state what that collaborator will be doing. We do have a question that says, I also saw building improvements are not accepted. Would installing gutters to redirect runoff from a picnic shelter roof to a rain garden be acceptable? I mean, think with that justification that you're redirecting that water to a rain garden would be something that would be a fundable thing. I would stay within reason, however. If it's a large building, you would really need to justify and show us the square footage, that type of thing. If it's something that's just small, like I think you referred to as a picnic shelter roof, so you probably just have the 2 sides to it and just 2 longer pieces of runoff or drain piping, that typically would be something that we would consider with that justification in there, saying that it's going to a rain garden. That's a very good question. Getting back to our letters, of course, again, your letters must be signed and printed on organizational letterhead, and then we do not accept emails as support letters or collaboration letters. So make sure these letters are, again, not form, and make sure they are on letterhead and signed by that individual. And it's, again, especially the collaboration letters, making sure that they are detailing what they're providing as a collaborator. Letters of support. We have one more question here. It says, I have a collaborator who is an individual and does not have letterhead. Is that okay? We've received that in the past. We've received letters from teachers that at the last minute just didn't get the school letterhead. We've not had too many reviewers that's commented negatively on that. But if they could come up with some type of letterhead, whether they're maybe collaborating with another individual, or maybe you could use your letterhead with your organization, and then just, I would basically explain that to the reviewer that their organization does not have a letterhead, maybe doesn't have a logo at the time or whatever, and just make sure that you're justifying that in the project and letting the reviewer know. If you think there's ever a doubt, make sure that you explain it so the reviewer understands it as well. Because if you're not explaining it, then the reviewer will understand, and that's when they may take off points. Very good. Another good question. Letters of support, of course, represent the target audience and should provide letters of support. So a good example of that would be an educator, a teacher, because you're actually targeting her support, his or her audience of the students in order to do the project. And then letters should demonstrate the audience is committed to participating in the project as well. So how are they going to participate? How are they going to provide? What are they? Maybe maybe they'll provide some help to you in the classroom or something along those lines. If the teacher's physically doing something, then they might want to use the collaborator word, because they might be running a station during a project or something along those lines. And if that's the case, I would definitely have them not be a supporter, but have them be a collaborator for your project. Letters of collaboration. Collaborators should describe or outline their role in the project, and we've talked about that several times before. Some examples of that, not limited to providing funds. They might dedicate some staff time. It could be something along the lines of a volunteer, and I would encourage you to go to a website called volunteer.org or volunteersector.org, I believe it is. And if you look that up, it's going to give you an amount that Ohio volunteers earn, and they calculate that through the amount of people that's in the state of Ohio, the geographic region, and so forth. And I believe the last time I was on that website, Ohio volunteers were roughly making about $28 an hour. So dedicating staff time or volunteers is something that can be used as far as a collaboration letter goes. And of course, it'll be in kind on the budget spreadsheet as well. And then maybe purchasing new equipment. So if you're a collaborator and you've bought equipment in the last 2 or 3 years, you could certainly put that down on the in-kind side, and then just make sure in the letter of collaboration you're using the word collaboration and then showing how you're collaborating by letting them borrow the new equipment that you purchased. This is my contact number and information again. So very, very short webinar today. Any other questions that you might have, we can stay on the phone here just a little bit longer and answer any question that you might have.
Do you want to tell them about the short recording we did yesterday? Yeah.
Also, we did a recording yesterday of how to use each tab. So there was not any information about, collaboration or support or anything like that, but it was just basically me going through each of the tabs. So that will also be hopefully posted tomorrow on our website, that you can have one screen open on one side working on your application and maybe another screen or another window open on your computer showing you where information goes. And I think that's very helpful to people, because sometimes we just don't know, that you have to include something, like an end date or a beginning date or under the activities, and to see that screen and where those things are added, like a project objective and an activity and an outcome measurement, is very, very important. Okay, so we have some questions here. It says, so we are required to include volunteer time as matching funds. No, you're not required, but volunteer time is very important, and if you have that available to you, I would just stay within reason of volunteer hours. So you might have 2 or 3 volunteers, and you know, they're making, say, whatever that amount is on that volunteersector.org, $28. We've had applications come in the past where they've said they've had 40 or 50 volunteers, and they've tried to include that as in-kind match, and that just does not work for the reviewers. So be very cautious of that and just be very selective on how many you use, but it's not a requirement. The only requirement under the budget is a 10% in-kind match. If you can far and meet and exceed that by 50%, you do get some bonus points on your application. This says, do we include the volunteer time in the budget? Absolutely. You can put that on your side of the in-kind match. When I'm saying on your side, when you get in the system, you're going to see an OEF request, and then you're going to see an in-kind match or in-kind match side, and that's where that would be included. When you go to put a budget item in, it would be under salary and wages. And when you go to put a budget item in, you're going to get a box that pops up, and in that box you're going to have an A and B section for OEF and an A and B section for in-kind match. You have to choose, if you're asking for OEF funds, you either have to choose A or B, whether it's hourly or salary, and then under the in-kind match, if you're just doing it as in-kind match, and this is where the volunteer time would come in, you either have to choose if it was hourly or salary as well. And then you can only have 2 of those lines with funds requested or funds being given in 2 of those lines. And that's going to make a lot more sense once you get into the system and you see that box pop up. It says, how many letters of collaboration are recommended? We don't make recommendations of how many letters you need. It's just simply how many do you need in order to do your project. If you have 4 collaborators, you need 4 letters of collaboration. In the past, we did have a teacher one time that had 72 letters of collaboration. 72 letters of collaboration for a small mini grant is not needed, okay? So be very cautious to that. I would, you know, say just my best guesstimate, if I were doing a water quality thing and I'm doing it, maybe Soil and Water Conservation's helping me, OSU Extension's helping me, and the EPA's helping me, then you would basically have 3 letters of collaboration from those 3 offices basically there to help you do the project. So we don't make recommendations on, though, whether you should have 3 or 4. It's just based merely on your project. Okay? And that's basically it. We don't have any other questions. So thank you for your time. I really appreciate that. Feel free to give me a call or email, and I'm happy to answer any question that you may have using the system or with the grant process. Good luck to you.